Grief, gratitude, and grace, healing from loss. Grieving is as natural as breathing. What we lose and the resulting grief manifest in different ways, from trauma to sadness. How we process our losses and learn to live with holes in our hearts can lead us to grace and peace. Loretta Downs has a BA in psychology and an MA in gerontology. For 30 years, she has worked with people living the end of their lives and the people who love them and survived them. Please join me in welcome Loretta Downs.
Good morning.
Good morning. Test, test, test. Oh, good. Hi. Hello. Thank you all for coming out on this unbelievably chilly day for us. Not unbelievably, surprisingly chilly day. I have a few things I want to organize here. Okay. Thanks, Kat. I love that Winnie the Pooh. Wouldn't you know this doesn't fit? Okay. Huh. Yeah, this is, we're all, can you hear me? Am I okay?
No.
No? Not? Who says no? No, okay, they can't. Now can you hear me? Closer, I was told to do that. All right, so, yeah, this was my ninth open circle presentation. And what I usually talk about dying, and we're all here, so you can hear me talk about it some more. But I moved to Mexico, I moved out full-time a year ago. And after 9 winters of coming, and I realized that, in order to do that, I had to let go of a lot of things, as many of us have. A lot of it, fortunately, were the things in my life that I'd spent my life collecting. I was a photographer for decades and decades. I was the only person that I knew who had a camera. And all my friends had pictures I took in their albums in my family, and then all of a sudden everybody had a digital camera, and I said, why bother? Did they send me the pictures? No. So I had to let go of thousands of photos and stuff, and gave away, and people took things. It was really beautiful. But recently I've realized I'm still grieving that separation from my family of origin, the dozens and dozens of close friends I left behind. 3 of them have come to see me, and they wondered what my life and my happiness was so good, and 2 of them bought a house here. So maybe some of my family is going to move down here. They've certainly come to visit. But this, we're all carrying grief. And there are different kinds of grief, losses. We all have losses that we respond to loss with grief. And we all have it. It's part of life. And we live in a grief-aversive, death-denying society. So we don't get the support we need when we suffer a loss. And often we don't accept the support we get because we find it so uncomfortable to be grieving. There's a story of the Buddha. A woman who lived in his village came to him one day carrying her dead child. And she begged the Buddha, please cure my child, heal him, bring him back to life. And the Buddha said, I can help you. Bring me a white mustard seed from a house in the village that has not known death. And the woman began to go through the village, and she was gone for hours, and she came back and faced the Buddha without anything in her hand, and she understood everyone has a loss from a death. We all have. There are different kinds of losses we experience. When my mother moved into long-term care, she gave me a pair of gold earrings. She said, I'm not going to need them anymore. And I lost one of that. I wore them all the time, every day. They were my daily earrings. And they were perfect, and I loved them, and I lost one of them some years ago. And I was so upset about that. I blamed myself for not taking care of them. I kept looking for them. I posted signs around. I wrote my friends. But I got through it. because it was a small loss, and actually I can still see the earrings as I talk about them, and they're on me in photographs too. And we all have those kinds of losses that we heal from. Because while grief is natural for humans, we have the intelligence to recover from it. You know, animals grieve too. There's stories of elephants who will wait when one of the elephants dies. The whole community will grieve with it for a while, and then they go on to where they need to go for more food and water. So impermanence is something that we live with it. The weather, how's that for impermanence? The seasons, things are blooming now. I'm sneezing all the time. I'm living with Kleenex in my sleeves. The perfect sign of older age. And things, the leaves will be falling, things are changing. We live with impermanence. And if you were here last week to hear Kat's beautiful presentation on impermanence, she reminded us that adversity forces us to awaken to the deeper dimension of who we are. That is so critical. Adversity does make us stronger. Being vulnerable, facing our vulnerability, makes us stronger. Part of the work of being elders is to find the gains in our lives. We're the lucky ones. We're still here, right? Like the Olympians of aging. Truly. And we've accepted the challenge to live our lives really well. That's why we're here in this particular place at this particular moment. And that's impermanent too. There's going to be another moment, and this will be over in 40 minutes, and you'll go on to something else. But the thing about life, engaging in the full range of experience, living and dying, love and loss, that's what we get to do. Being human doesn't happen despite suffering. It happens within suffering. And that's a quote from Lucy Kalanithi. She was pregnant when her husband was diagnosed with stage 4 terminal cancer. He wrote a book called When Breath Becomes Air. It's just beautiful. A beautiful book. He died when he was 39. Some of us are almost twice that age. And yet she can say this, that we have to go through our suffering to come out of it. We have to go through our grief to get out of it. When we talk about loss, the language of loss is really tricky. If there were a child standing here and I said, I lost my sister a couple years ago, the kid would say, can I help you find her? I mean, that whole I lost my mother. My mom died. There's a whole different message in that. And part of our death denial is not using the appropriate language that happens. And we don't like to talk about death and dying. And because of that, many of us are dying really hard. And many of those of us who are supporting people at the end of their lives are having a limited experience because we're not allowed into it. So working on the language of loss is going to help us. From now on, what we have is growth ahead. We've worked, we've had our careers, we've had our families, we've made friendships, we've healed losses, we've grown. But now, this is the time we go deeper into ourselves, as Kat reminded us. Jeff Foster, written a whole bunch of books. He says, you will lose everything. This may sound obvious, but really knowing it is the key to everything, the why and how and wherefore of existence. Impermanence has always rendered everything and everyone around you so deeply holy and significant and worthy of your heartbreaking gratitude. Loss has already transfigured your life into an altar. How's that for language?
Wow.
You are sacred space because of the losses you hold, not in spite of. Loves, lives, companion animals, homes, things. We'll lose them all. When my mom moved into a nursing home, after leaving the house she'd loved like a lover for 54 years, moved into assisted living with a few of the things from her house, moved into a nursing home with a closet this big, a nightstand with 2 drawers, and a dresser with 4. Everything gone, and she was happy. She adjusted, she told me one day they treat me like a queen. I would go in feeling really bad and guilty, and she was there, and she was happy with very little. And that's how we're all going to eventually leave this life, right? Without anything. And just like my earrings, my mom's not lost. Our loved ones aren't lost. They're just somewhere else right now. And they're also within us, which is what Jeff Foster's talking about. The losses of people we love and the creatures we love has transfigured our lives, transformed us into something really holy and sacred. And I'm going to talk about how we use that a little bit later. We're suffering collective losses right now. And if you were here last week to hear David Bryan talk about it, if you haven't, please watch his video. It's brilliant. We're suffering the collective losses of COVID. You know, the whole experience, the conflicts that have been created over this, the human losses, the personal losses, the world losses. You know, we're suffering the collective losses of the environment. You know, next week you're going to hear about our precious lake, and it's not all going to be good. We're suffering the collective loss of economic inequities. We see it here all the time. We read about it. Just these collective losses that we cannot take alone. We have to share them, and we have to stand in them, and we have to stand against them too. This is part of the growth and the gain. We can't change everything, but we certainly can influence some changes. You know, there are 4 things, according to Erin Van Buren, who wrote a book of poetry called The Planet of Letting Go. She says there are 4 things in life that will change you: love, music, art, and loss. The first 3 will keep you wild and full of passion. May you allow the last to make you brave. And that's how we need to face grief, with courage, because it hurts. It can hurt physically, it certainly hurts emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. We question, why did this happen to me? Why do I have cancer? Why did my spouse die? Why did this person die? Why did that happen? Why did my car break down when I don't have money to fix it? We question what happens because that's part of the grieving process. You know, they say now there are 7 stages of grief. They've added 2 more. Right? The first one is shock and denial. This is a state of disbelief and numb feelings. Oh yeah. Very often we get bad news on the phone. Oh, my Aunt Will died. What can you do over the phone? Right? Your first reaction, shock. And you go, oh, this didn't happen. And then, what can I do? And the frustration of not being able to do anything because you're 1,000 miles away, or because, that's a good one, right? We're not there. Makes it harder. What can I do? Well, there are things we can do. The next step, pain and guilt. Ooh, pain and guilt, right? A loss, guilt. I have had so many caregivers say to me, I didn't do enough. Does that ring a bell for anyone? Yeah. Self-compassion. You have to transform that to self-compassion. We always do enough. We do what we can do. We do as much as we can do when we can do it. Self-compassion is a very important part of the grief process. Because grief is a process. It goes on for a while. Different grief, different losses, result in different kinds and different qualities and characters of grieving. Again, my mother's earring had some sort of grief for it, but losing my mother was a whole different kind of grief and a process. Anger and bargaining, right? Oh, that's a real easy one. We humans are so tricky. Oh my goodness. Instead of saying, oh, it is what it is, how can I be with this? I'm going to get angry. Ugh. Why me? And then we get depressed. And depression really is anger turned inward. It's a classic psychological definition of the expression. You turn anger at yourself. Again, I didn't do enough, I should have been, da-da-da. You know, the 9/11 stories, that's fascinating. A lot of people, 3,000 and something people died in 9/11 in the World Trade Centers and the other targets. And there are stories about people that morning who left the house but then went back for something and were not in the towers that day. People who called their wife, there's a man who called his wife on the way home and said, I just forgot to say I love you, and he went to work and died. There were all sorts of mysterious, amazing happenings on that. And all the first responders, the ones that weren't there and the ones that got lost and the survivors. You know, survivor guilt is another grief that we have to work with. People in a car accident. My aunt Will was killed by a drunken driver 3 weeks after my sister's wedding in 1954. I was the flower girl at the wedding. We had all this celebration, and then her husband had a broken leg, and she died. You know, there's all kinds of things that we have to be strong and courageous in order to survive, because we are surviving. And we learn the lessons from these experiences. You know, there's an upward turn. That's another stage of grief when you realize, oh, I can manage this. I can live now. I can still live. Reconstruction and working through grief is another stage. And finally, acceptance and hope. Acceptance and hope. Hope. This is a quote from Robert Masters, also author of a bunch of books. Go to the heart of your pain, and you won't find more pain, but a freedom that doesn't require the absence of pain. You can live with it. A freedom that doesn't require the absence of pain. You know, there are holes in our heart, as my introduction said, and they're not going to go away. Not going to go away, you know. But we can fill them with something different. It doesn't change the character of the fact that there's something absent. You know, we have lost rituals. And the fact that we're not doing rituals anymore. And that's depriving us of the mourning process that's a community experience. One of the best things about being human is being close to other ones. I mean, right here in this circle, we have closeness. We have friends. I saw a lot of you. I have friends here. Thank you for coming. Thank you all for coming. But we need each other. By its very nature, intimacy involves a certain amount of vulnerability. There's such abundance in being fully present with someone, provided, of course, that we've chosen that someone wisely. And that's important. When you're grieving, you want to be with people who are going to nurture you, not bring you down. And you can choose those people with whom you associate. I was at a death last week, and we did a ritual ceremony, and one of the wife's friends was invited, and she just came in and brought this lightness of being that was so valuable at that moment. And it changed the whole experience by having the presence of this lightness. She told a couple of, not quite jokes, but things that made us laugh. And it made a difference. Now, we could have invited somebody else who came in with, oh, I'm so sad that this happened, and that wasn't nurturing. So I think this is important to choose the people wisely who you want to listen to. You know, Eli Wiesel, he was in a concentration camp as a teenager in Germany, and he came out of that and decided to write. a lot. And he eventually won a Nobel Peace Prize. He said, "I've learned 2 lessons in my life. First, there are no sufficient literary, psychological, or historical answers to human tragedy, only moral ones. Second, just as despair can come to one only from other human beings, hope too can be given to one only by other human beings." We're a community, you know? When someone you know, love, has lost a person, a companion animal, an important thing even, reach out, write them, drop a note in the mailbox or under the door, you know, send old photos. I have a friend who's now going through all his old photos and he's sending them to people in them with just a note, "Thanks for the memories." Doesn't have to be big, because something small can be very big to the recipient. Reminiscing is tremendous. Listening. I want to tell you a story about listening. There was a wise man who lived at the top of a mountain, and people would go up to the mountain looking like they were carrying a burden, and they'd come down happy. And a man who lived in the neighborhood watched this day after day. People going up looking sad, confused, anxious, coming down happy. And one day the man on the top of the mountain came down and the neighbor came over and said, "What do you tell them up there?" And he said, "Nothing. I just listen." What a gift. We all want to be heard, especially if we have something heavy inside us going on. And grief is that thing. Grief needs to be shared, needs to be talked about, needs to be held, not judged, not corrected, not fixed. It's something we all have to go through, and it's something we all need to support each other through too. You know, there's anticipatory grief. I don't know, I have another woman I worked with here who had a party. She was diagnosed, she was in her late 60s, diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and decided not to treat it so she could control the rest of her life. And she threw a party, a celebration of life. Was anybody there? Was it Eve's? 60 people. She gave everybody, volunteers, friends were volunteers. The greeter had, everybody got a drink ticket. Everybody got some tacos and appetizers, and if you wanted to order more of anything, you could pay for it. Friends had made these paper flowers, and they were all over the garden, and they had created this little throne area for her, and she was all dressed up and dolled up. People were going, "Oh, I don't know how to think about this." And there was a table, and she brought little things of hers on the table, and she hung jewelry on a little tree, and she told everyone to take something. And I sat at a table with one person I knew and 3 I didn't, and when I sat down, I said, "Well, how do you feel about this?" And one of them said, "I don't know." You know, but there was anticipatory grief going on, both from the woman who was dying, who knew she was dying, and all the people there, and there was also great celebration. This was living. This was loving, this was sharing, this was community, this was friendship, this was memories. I mean, everybody has these beautiful, she walked around like you know, Pearl Mesta, like that, talking to everybody. This was fabulous, and everybody has something that she gave them. It was beautiful, and everybody was grieving. And actually, anticipatory grief, you know, dementia, which I'm going to talk about next year. Dementia is something that causes an awful lot of ongoing grieving. And I think anyone who's cared for someone through dementia would say that they had such a sense of relief at the end of it because their loved one was now free of suffering. That the grief after is so different than when we lose somebody unexpectedly or without time to grieve. You know, there are 4 things we have to say to each other that we need to say before the end, and one of them is, "I love you." The other is, "Thank you." "I'm sorry." Work on that. Because sometimes we lose people quickly, unexpectedly, and if you're carrying around a little resentment that you haven't resolved, you're going to suffer more. "I'm sorry." And if I need to apologize to you or you need to apologize to me, let's fix this. Let's move on. Let's go back into life because we want to create peace. And the best way to create peace is with gratitude. You know, I think if you've heard me speak before, you've heard me talk about gratitude. Scientific studies are showing that it makes a difference. There's this, gratitude is the expression of appreciation for what one has. Suffering is the experience of not having what we want. So gratitude is a recognition of value independent of monetary worth. Spontaneously generated from within, it's an affirmation of goodness and warmth. This social emotion strengthens relationships, and its roots run deep into evolutionary history. It emanates from the survival value of helping others and being helped in return. Community, friendship, love. Scientific studies show that specific areas of the brain are involved in experiencing and expressing gratitude. Brain scans of people assigned a task that stimulates the expression of gratitude show lasting changes in the prefrontal cortex that heighten sensitivity to future experiences of gratitude. Makes us happier. Don't y'all want to be happier? Yeah. And happier results in healthier. That's also been proven in scientific studies. We all want peace. You know, El Ojo this month, if you haven't grabbed a copy of it, it has 2 beautiful articles on gratitude. Editor Victoria Schmidt, who has a lot to be grieving, also has a lot to be grateful for. And that results in peace and in grace. And I want to give you some perfect examples of grace. And grace really is peace. How do we get there? By doing good, by loving well, by saying those 4 things all the time. Don't wait till you're saying goodbye to somebody. You know, Michael J. Fox is a perfect example. He says that I don't know where to mail gratitude to, so I give it out every day. No mailing address for gratitude. Michael J. Fox has raised over $1 billion for Parkinson's research. That's grief in action. That's healing grief by doing something that helps others. Christopher and Dana Reeve, their foundation has raised $150 million for spinal cord injuries. I mean, this is a way, giving back is a way to gain grace. Healing your grief so you can use it. You know, anyone ever hear of Alex's lemonade stand? Alex was a little girl who at the age of 1 was diagnosed with glioblastoma brain tumor. And of course her parents did everything they could do to help her live longer, and hopefully forever, or until she got old. And she wasn't doing very well. And on her 4th birthday, she had a stem cell transplant. And when she got out, she said to her mom, when I get out of the hospital, I want a lemonade stand so I can raise money for my hospital. And her dad built her a lemonade stand, and her older brother and she manned it. And that day they raised $2,000. Because who can pass a bald little girl and her big brother selling lemonade? You know, in the book, Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, he wrote, always buy something when a child is selling it. And you know, here, I heard the other day someone said, oh, don't do that because it's supporting begging.
No way.
What's a few pesos? It can matter a lot to somebody. And if a child's selling something, buy it. So Alex, on her 4th, so her dad did that, and then she kept selling lemonade and kept making more money. But on her 8th birthday, she died. 8 years. 8 years, that child lived a whole life. You know, I've heard it said frequently that the worst thing for a parent to experience is the death of a child. Perhaps even worse is the loss of the parent's self. It's a hard loss, and many losses. There are spouses who say, I don't know how I can live without you. We need to go on in the world to do things like Michael Fox is doing, like Alex's parents are doing. Her foundation, Alex's Lemonade Stand, has raised over $250 million for pediatric cancer research. She's with her parents all the time. She's with anybody who's ever bought a glass of lemonade from them. We don't go away. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. When we die, we're all over the place. And you don't have to buy an airline ticket to get there. Anyone who you love who has died is with you. Your ancestors are in every cell in your body, everywhere. I got a dog last year against my better wishes. I said, oh my God, a dog. I love my dog. And when I got my dog, I knew two things. I had to find somebody to take him if I died, or even if I get sick and I can't take care of him. And fortunately, I found her. And the other was that one day I'm going to have to release him from his suffering. That's a covenant I made to him. I will protect you. And we do that with our loved ones, in the awareness of their impermanence, awareness of our own impermanence. You know, the serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's life. That's every day of our lives. You know, this is Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Another, he worked in concentration camps that kept him alive because he was a psychiatrist. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Love. The subject for tonight is love, and for tomorrow night as well. As a matter of fact, I know of no better topic to discuss until we all die. Hafiz, 1300. Love. Let's be love. Ram Dass said, I am loving awareness. Let's be it. It will help us survive what's coming next. Now realize, if you draw a line on a piece of paper and this is your birth and this is your death, ask yourself where you are now. Where are you? Everything that's happened in the past you can't change. Process it. Learn from it. Love it. Give yourself self-compassion. We make mistakes. Sometimes big ones, sometimes little ones, but we all make mistakes. We're human. Forgive, let it go, fix it. Because the next part is the ooh la la part. This is what we got. Seriously. And in this part, there's going to be a lot of loss, a lot of grief, and a lot of joy. We have to make friends with death. No, we have to talk about it more. We have to plan ahead for it. In fact, LCS has this wonderful little free booklet called Being Prepared for Life and Death in Lakeside. You do not need to be a member. Pick it up at the office. Mm-hmm. Inside it, it has a very basic form of information. It looks big, but it's like your name, your address, your parents' names.